The shadow's cool. Going off of our study of art history, how can we take an animal and plug in the information of the pose and the composition and the lighting into a new piece? So we're trying to find an opportunity to portray an animal in convincing realism, but position them in a way that has never been seen before. We're trying not to dress the animal up in clothing. We're not taking a dog and dressing it up and just putting it into that exact situation. We're juxtaposing an animal into the lighting and composition and pose from art history. So I'm going to work with Bernini's David. And for this next phase, I've accumulated a few skeletal references of a dog. Some of them are scientific drawings. Some of them are photographs of skeletons. I'm going to start by looking at my Bernini drawing, or my Bernini slide. You've already done drawing studies of Bernini, but I'm going to figure out where the geometric skeleton is. So we've got the head, the rib cage set atop the spinal column, the hips, knee, leg, foot. This one goes further back. This arm, shoulder, elbow, come back. I don't see that other arm. Something like that. How do I take this geometric human skeleton and now plug in a skeleton of a dog? Maybe I'll just do it off to the side here first. Got our rib cage, hips, femur, tibia, tarsus, or scapula. There are a couple ways you could approach this. You could do a detailed bone drawing of your animal, which some of you may find helpful. Or you could find the simple shapes. You may end up deciding to do both. So I've got to take this and plug it into what I see here. So I'm going to start off by using my line of action, drawing the positioning of the skull, which is actually pretty comparable to that of a human, where it's egg-shaped, but perhaps a little bit more rectangular. And the proportions change. There's a longer neck, rib cage here following the spinal column. The hips appear to be a pretty good rectangle too, but more narrow. So maybe it's twisting towards us. And now when we plug the legs in here, we've got to have one coming forward. I did that entire drawing off camera. I have no idea what was actually filmed, so let's try again. I'm plugging in the animal's geometric shapes that I drew here and trying to figure out how the rib cage, we're looking down on the rib cage, here's the scapula, how this animal can twist in space and capture a sense of Bernini's David. So just roughing in the geometric skeleton for how the dog would work. And again, I kind of mentioned already, I'm gonna think of it as the dog is catching a Frisbee, because that seems logical. I want him to feel like he's flying through the air. So if I block in my negative space with shadow, for our finals, we're gonna be doing these subtractively, which I guess in theory, you could do your studies subtractively. I just opted not to. So this is just a study where I'm trying to figure out how this will work. Not concerned at all right now about texture. This is just dealing with the skeleton. I can work in with the eraser to chip out the form a little bit more deliberately as needed. I think also the dog's head has to come down. It doesn't feel proportionate. And I think the Frisbee has to get bumped out. Like, this is what a dog would do. Again, I don't have a dog. I don't know anything about dogs. Oh my gosh, this drawing is not on the camera again? I don't have a dog. I don't know anything about dogs. So this is just kind of my assumption of what a dog would actually do. I think a dog would play frisbee and jump into the air for a frisbee. I don't think a dog would hold a slingshot in the air, stand on its hind legs, and wind up as if it's throwing a discus to annihilate Goliath. I could be wrong, but I don't think it would do that. So I'm trying to take the pose that is provided to me in art history and use it to suggest a new sort of surprising moment of action. I feel like I want to see the dog's ears flying backward. When we do these for real, we're going to be working subtractively. So we'll begin with a velvety charcoal, compressed charcoal base, and we'll be constructing these using the eraser. When this is real, I would probably tilt the dog, so that it has more of a sense of weightlessness. Because right now, I really feel like the dog looks like it's standing. There are elements in here that I like. I think this is still kind of too meaty. I'd have to use additional photo references to actually see how the dog's face would be constructed, because we're going for realism. And again, this is just a study. And I think what I've learned from this is that in the next study, he shouldn't be upright. I've got to tilt him more. Inevitably, I can't help but think, why? Why am I drawing a dog catching a frisbee, leaping through the air, if personally I don't have a connection to dogs beyond a childhood-based fear? Perhaps I'm trying to uncover the power and playfulness of this animal. Two things can be true. An animal can be powerful and it can be playful and loving and tender. So perhaps in my exploration of a dog as subject matter, it's to come to an understanding and appreciation of its form, of its beauty, of its splendor. This dog in this second attempt, it feels like it's soaring through space. I can't help but think of two things. First, superheroes, like these beings that are capable of things beyond our own ability and understanding. And I'm also thinking of dancers, ballerinas, figures, humans who are capable of grace and of gravity-defying positioning. It's a gentle, understated strength. In both cases, we're seeing strength and power in a superhero, in a ballerina. They're just displayed very differently. So if I've got this fear, this trepidation of this sort of animal rooted in my childhood, how can I capture that, but at the same time celebrate the kind of splendor and majesty of this animal? I feel like this is rocketing towards us out of the shadows in space, which I can think of plenty of times when a dog has run out at me, sometimes at night. So that's relatable, but I'm also, because of the media, finding an understanding of the grace and the gentility and the beauty and the unity of in the world around him. In my first version, the expression was far more gentle, and here it became fairly ferocious. This is also a dog that I'm completely making up at this stage, because right now I'm just trying to understand the pose based on the geometric skeleton and on the will this work as a pose? Will this work as a final? So this is essentially a glorified thumbnail where I'm just trying to work out the specifics of the pose. I'm also practicing the actual rendering. This doesn't read as a frisbee yet. I've got quite a bit of work to do there, and I think that'll be a challenge for me, honestly, in this drawing of how do you get it to read as a frisbee. I might have a much easier time using a stick. However, if I look to my original subject matter, which is Bernini's David, on the one hand, a frisbee makes sense. If I've always thought of Bernini's David as almost like a discus thrower, but if we think of what he's throwing a rock. A dog can play fetch with a stick, But in this story, it might be more appropriate if he's playing catch with a ball. I love tennis, so perhaps as an approximation to the size of that rock, perhaps it makes sense for the dog to have a tennis ball in its mouth. And as soon as I do that, I think my relationship with the composition, or my thoughts on the composition, change. Because now I feel like I've got this gaping mouth where before it was so clearly an object. I think I might want to dramatize the turn of the head. And the charcoal allows me to do that. And again, this is still the idea phase. If I turn the face in this direction, again, he still looks completely ferocious, like straight out of my nightmares. But I'm going to make a conscious decision not to do that. I want to find an appreciation of this animal that so many people love. That's a pretty dramatic head turn, but I've got to find a balance in my next drawing. How do I communicate that this is clearly a tennis ball and it is in the dog's mouth? There's no certain number of these drawings that you're going to be required to do, except that you've got to do enough to explore it thoroughly. It's vague, but you got to do it until it works. I might be tempted to think that this works, but it doesn't. It doesn't. It doesn't. Don't settle for your first option and keep pushing. Keep exploring. I think as many as you can do in at least a day. Maybe you need more than that, but don't settle. I think this has attributes that are better than the one that came before it, but neither of them is there yet. Proportion-wise, this is more of a dog. However, this may have more humanized proportions. This one has more of a fluidity. However, I feel like we lose certainly a lot of logic in the neck to head area. When I look back at my skeleton, there's got to be more of a presence of the neck. So I'm probably looking at another one, and then we would see where we go from there. It might require 4, 5, 6. I won't know until I get there. It's just one at a time and trying to explore this composition as best I can. What did work here was the curve. I feel like he's lunging out of the darkness, whereas this one felt like he was standing. So I'm gonna take that as an accomplishment on this drawing. But at this point, I'm ready to go again. Thanks so much for watching. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask me in person, or you can email me, and you can always refer back to this video as necessary. All right, see you tomorrow.